Good morning, friends. Did you know that this book is the first book in a series, The Cobble Street Cousins? So if you like this book, you can read more from one of our very favorite authors, Cynthia Rylant. So far, our friends have just finished their cookie delivery business, and they met some really fun people along the way. I've been writing down their names as we go, and I've been taking note of some of the things that make them different from each other. Let's see if we can pay attention to some more details about the characters in the concluding chapter of In Aunt Lucy's Kitchen. The show. The Cobble Street Cookie Company lasted exactly 3 weeks, and then it folded. Lily, Rosie, and Tess made $10 apiece. Enough for a new rabbit for Lily, a tea set for Rosie, and a record for Tess. Then they took down all the ads, for the girls were quite tired of baking and ready for something new. "We should go visit Michael," said Lily one afternoon. "Oh, no, Lily," said Rosie. "Mother would never want us intruding." "But he hasn't come to the shop to see Aunt Lucy yet," said Lily. "He needs a nudge." "If you nudge him too hard, he might break his other leg," said Tess with a giggle. "He might fall off a porch," said Rosie. Tess and Rosie couldn't stop giggling. "You two are so unromantic," complained Lily. "We should do something." The cousins thought about how they might introduce Michael to Aunt Lucy. I was just looking at my chart that I made, and I was trying to remember what Lily was like, and I remembered that she's the one who writes poems and collects rabbits. She's got a very romantic heart. I like that. "Why not have a performance and invite Michael and Mrs. Haverstock?" said Tess. "What sort of performance?" asked Lily. "A program," said Tess, "with poetry and song like the artists in Paris do." "I could write a poem to read aloud," said Lily. "Maybe a poem about two young lovers finding each other." "Or falling off a bus," giggled Rosie. "I could sing, of course," said Tess. "Something old and romantic, sort of bluesy." "What shall I do?" asked Rosie. "Give a lecture on stained glass," said Lily. "No," Rosie grinned, giving Lily a little push. "You could be the host," said Tess. "You can welcome everyone and introduce us like the Oscars." "Okay," said Rosie. "Let's find some paper and make invitations," said Lily. The girls printed out 4 decorated invitations, one for Aunt Lucy, one for Michael and Mrs. Haverstock, one for Mrs. White, to be polite, for they doubted she would come, and one for Mr. French of French's Market. He was always so kind to the cousins, and had even given them 2 free jars of cinnamon when they were in business. The program was scheduled for Sunday afternoon. It was called A Collection of Classics by Comely Cousins. It was Lily's idea. Tess wanted to call it simply The Show, but Rosie sided with Lily. Aunt Lucy was very sweet in helping the girls prepare the house for company. She put pots of daisies and daylilies all around the parlor and made fresh blueberry muffins to serve with tea. She even lit candles and lined them up on the fireplace mantel. "So dramatic," said Tess. The cousins weren't sure if anyone would come to the collection of classics, but at 1:45 they saw a large green car pull up in front of Aunt Lucy's house. "It's Mrs. Haverstock," cried Lily, "and Michael!" The girls ran outside to greet him. Just put this way. Mrs. Haverstock was all dressed up and smelled of perfume. She looked very elegant, and she smiled broadly at the cousins. "Hello again," she called. And look at this. This is really fun. The pictures in this book are so cute. These are all the different invitations they made to their friends. I see a cat there. That one's to Mrs. White. We know that she likes to make cats. Michael pulled himself out of the car and leaned on a cane. He was dressed more simply in jeans and a sports coat. He waved shyly at the girls. Rosie stepped up and shook Michael's hand as the other girls led Mrs. Haverstock into the house. "Hi, Michael," Rosie said with a big smile. "How are your trees?" "Taller," said Michael. "Just like you, Rosie. I believe you've grown." Rosie shook her head and lifted a foot. "Heels," she whispered. Tess insisted. See, she looks taller because she's wearing high heels. Michael grinned, gave Rosie his arm, and walked her to the front door. Just inside, Aunt Lucy was helping Mrs. Haverstock with her purse and jacket. Rosie glanced at Michael. He was blushing again. Rosie led him proudly to Aunt Lucy. "This is my Aunt Lucy," said Rosie. How are you?" said Michael, extending his hand. "I'm Michael Livingston." His ears were red. Rosie couldn't wait to tell Lily and Tess, who were busy preparing to perform. "Hello, Michael," said Aunt Lucy. "The girls are so happy you've come. Would you care to sit down?" Michael looked at Aunt Lucy's old-fashioned parlor, with its wicker rocking chair, its fainting couch, its old family portraits on the wall. "I love old houses," said Michael. "Oh, please let me give you a tour," said Aunt Lucy. "We'll be right back, Rosie." Rosie wanted to scream as they walked away. She was so excited. Mrs. Haverstock was in the parlor, talking with Mr. French, who had just arrived. They knew each other well, for they had gone to high school together many years ago. Already they were traded stories and laughing. Aunt Lucy returned with Michael. She looked so happy. Then, just as everyone was seated and Rosie was about to begin her welcome, the doorbell rang. On the front porch was Mrs. White, holding the arm of a taxi driver. Well, I didn't think she was going to come, but she came. That's pretty neat. "Mrs. White!" the three cousins called in delight. Aunt Lucy followed them to welcome Mrs. White into the house. "I haven't seen a good show in 50 years, my dears," said Mrs. White. "I thought I'd better not miss this one." "We're so glad you could come, Mrs. White," said Aunt Lucy. "I am Lucy Weatherby, and of course you know my girls." "You're angels," said Mrs. White with a smile. She thanked the taxi driver and followed everyone to the parlor. Michael and Mr. French both stood up and offered Mrs. White their seats. "Thank you, gentlemen, but this small chair will do just fine," she said. Eventually, all were introduced and settled, and the program began. Rosie welcomed everyone and wished them all a happy afternoon. Then she introduced Lily and added, "She will one day be a famous writer, and you will be glad you saw her here." Lily stepped forward and read a long poem about a young woman who was lost at sea. The poem was very sad at first, and Rosie, always the tender heart, got worried and thought she might cry. But then the young woman was found by her true love, and all turned out happily. When it was time for applause, Rosie clapped the hardest. Then she introduced Tess. "One of the finest young singers this side of Broadway," said Rosie. "She will perform, especially for Aunt Lucy, a love song called 'That Sweet New Face.'" All three girls looked at Michael, red as a strawberry. He is so embarrassed. Tess, wearing a large purple hat with feathers, stepped into the middle of the room. She took a small harmonica from her pocket, blew a few chords, then began singing. It was such a catchy tune that soon everyone in the room was tapping their feet. Mr. French had a wide grin on his face, and Mrs. Haverstock swayed back and forth to the rhythm. At the end of the song, Tess gave a deep bow to the audience. Rosie concluded the program by reminding everyone that tea and blueberry muffins could be served in the next room. Then all three cousins lined up and said, "Thank you and good night," in unison. Everyone applauded again. It was a lovely afternoon. Mrs. White stayed long enough for tea, but left before the others did. The same taxi driver came to pick her up. She gave each little girl another little cat before she left. All right, friends. There's a couple more pages left in this book, and my time is up for today. So we're going to finish it tomorrow. I'm so excited to see you then. I hope you come back because I know you're going to like the end of this book. And hopefully you'll like to read more of the Cobble Street Cousins. They are available in our school library. See you tomorrow.